Today we're talking about my top caution players for 2021, coming right up. And what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast for Tuesday, July 20th, 2021. And I am Chip, and I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please do me a favor, hit subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes. And, on today's episode, we'll be talking about my top caution players for 2021. There's always going to be guys that we see that are highly ranked, and just want to give you a little more information before you decide to jump on those guys or reach for them in the draft and may not see the value that you may get from someone else. So I'm not saying these are guys that you don't draft. These are guys that, because of where they're ranked, will they bring you back the same value when, throughout the season. If you pick someone in the top 5, you expect them to be a top 5 player. So there are some guys that I have some questions about that I'm just going to bring to your guys' attention and go from there. And on top of that, if you have been only listening to the podcast and not over on YouTube, I've been doing a lot of mock drafts on YouTube. I just dropped one yesterday. I did a 12-team standard league format, but the other two I did were half PPR formats. One was a running back, generally a running back heavy one. I generally, my personal preference for drafts are running back heavy drafts, and try to hit on some quarterbacks and receivers here and there. And then the one I did last week was the one about, I did a zero running back strategy where I went after some of the top receivers and tight ends. So a lot of good information there. If you want to see me draft live, I do that every Monday. So make sure you go over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of those. So I have a few players here. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players that I think are pretty, caution players that in my opinion, are guys that I just still have a question mark. I know the drafts are coming soon, and for me, I just have a question mark. So with that being said, let's start with the quarterback position. And when I'm going through the rankings of the quarterback position, there are guys that I know are just obviously definite players I'm going to draft. I mean, obviously your Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray's, those guys are without a doubt going to be your top guys. You're going to draft them high. You expect that value. Obviously if there's injury or not, but these are guys that you're drafting that for sure are going to get you your value back based on what we've seen, from them being stars in the last few years. The one guy that I have a question mark that's in the top 12, and this might be a guy that's on a lot of people's draft boards that have him ranked this high, but also there's a lot of question marks, and that's Jalen Hurts. Right now he is the consensus 9th quarterback right now, and for me, I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know exactly how I feel about Jalen Hurts being in front of guys like Ryan Tannehill and Tom Brady, stuff like people like that. I mean, it's just, I get the upside, but let's think about this though. Like, what do we know about Nick Sirianni? Right, he's a new head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. Doug Peterson got fired. Now I know Nick Sirianni is a offensive coordinator from Frank Wright's coaching tree, right? So Frank Wright was a offensive coordinator for the Eagles. He went over to the Indianapolis Colts, and he's been doing some good things, And my question is, what do we know about Nick Sirianni, right? So we know that he was the OC for the Colts from 2018 to 2020. When he had Andrew Luck in 2018, the Colts were they were 5th in team offense, and they were 6th in passing offense. And that's the year that Andrew Luck was he was a top 5 quarterback. But that's Andrew Luck, right? Everyone saw Andrew Luck as a generational talent. This is a guy that I wish he was still playing. He's just a fun quarterback to watch play, and it sucks that we don't see Andrew Luck playing anymore. But what I have a question about is what do we know about after Andrew Luck? So we know that once Andrew Luck retired, the Colts really had to figure out what they needed to do to try to find a way to salvage that season in 2008 or in 2019. So in 2019, they had Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback. They finished that year at the quarterback. They were 17th in total offense, and they were 30th in passing that year with Jacoby Brissett. And that year, Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback 23 in fantasy. So that obviously, talent-wise, I understand is a completely different talent. Andrew Luck to Jacoby Brissett, massive difference. But based on that, that's something that makes me a little red flag there for me, just because of talent. Now, Jalen Hurts, he's obviously more talented than Jacoby Brissett, but it's just numbers that I'm trying to throw at you to kind of see why I have some concern. Now, in 2020, last year, with Phillip Rivers, the team they finished 9th in total offense, and they were 11th in pass offense. So with Phillip Rivers, they were a lot better. But obviously, the upside for Phillip Rivers was just not there. When it comes to fantasy, as a fantasy quarterback, he was a guy that was, his last year in the league, he left, Los Angeles to come over to Indianapolis, and, that offense was still decent enough. So what we've seen so far is that there's been, they've had so far Nick Sirianni has been a top 10 offensive coordinator 2 out of the last 3 seasons. The one, anomaly being the year that they had to start Jacoby Brissett. But, what do we know about Jalen Hurts? We have a small sample size from 2020. Jalen Hurts was a guy that he started at the end of the season. We had a couple decent games, but I just don't know how I feel about that offense as a whole this year. I mean, the last time the Eagles had a top 10, top 5 quarterback, that was Carson Wentz, and that was in 2017 before we got injured. So what does that look like this year with the new head coach and new offense, and what they have around them? Like Jalen Hurts, from a talent standpoint, I mean, he's dealing with the second-year wide receiver in Jalen Reagor. They have the new rookie wide receiver Devontae Smith. They have Miles Sanders there. They still got Zach Ertz if he's still there when the season starts, and they got Dallas Goedert, right? So like, those are not pieces that I feel like, okay, that's a quarterback that makes me feel like he's going to be a top 5, top 10 type of quarterback. I feel like there's still some question marks where it makes me feel like if you're drafting Jalen Hurts at 9, I just don't see where his ceiling is. Where I feel more comfortable drafting. Drafting Ryan Tannehill over him, because yes, Julio Jones has AJ Brown. They got Derrick Henry at the offense. He's been in that Titans offense for multiple seasons. Like, I just feel more comfortable drafting Ryan Tannehill over Jalen Hurts. Now, I understand Jalen Hurts is a dual threat quarterback. I love dual threat quarterbacks. I try to go after them in my drafts, but I just don't. I don't want to. I want to pump the brakes a little bit on Jalen Hurts, just because I want to see more of that offense before the season starts. And maybe during the preseason we see a lot of different looks, which we may not, just because the fact that it's preseason. They're going to give you plain blank offenses. But I just feel like Jalen Hurts right now, for me, being top 9 and being drafted above like Ryan Tannehill and Tom Brady, and especially like Matthew Stafford. I mean, I know a lot of people are big on Matthew Stafford this year. I just see that drafting him above those guys. I wouldn't. That's my own personal opinion, but that's the quarterback that I have on my list as like one of my caution players going into 2021. Now, going to the running back position. Now, I'll probably get a lot of hate for this one, but my first running back that I have caution about right now is Alvin Kamara. As you can know, that I'm a huge Alvin Kamara fan. I've owned him every single year he's been in the league. He's by far him and Patrick Mahomes are the 2 guys I love watching play. But Alvin Kamara right now being ranked 3rd in PPR formats. And what's concerning about Alvin Kamara is the fact that Drew Brees is no longer on the team. Last year when Taysom Hill, if this is an example of what we're going to see with Taysom Hill as a quarterback, then I'm really concerned for Alvin Kamara. Taysom Hill last year started week 11, and he started for 4 games. In that time frame, Kamara was the RB25, the RB36, and then he was an RB9, and then RB9 again. So that is very up and down for a guy who's being drafted so high right now. Now, do we know how much he's going to be targeted? Right now, Alvin Kamara has been targeted almost average over 100 times a season. He's had about average about 81 to 82 receptions per year, and he's not a guy that gets a lot of yards. He came close to 1,000 yards last year on the ground, but one of those things that he's a guy that he's elite when he's able to catch the ball in the backfield. And with Drew Brees now retiring, no longer the quarterback, now we got to deal with Taysom Hill or maybe Jameis Winston. I just don't see him getting targeted as much and him seeing that value being drafted so high. So it's one of those things that, like, are we going to finally see a regression of Alvin Kamara being an elite fantasy running back? I mean, I know everybody loves him. I love him still. It's hard for me to think that he's not going to be on my roster this year. I mean, I have him in Dynasty, so that's one thing that I still have. But like going into like redraft leagues, like that's a big concern for me. So, he's been a top 5 running back 3 times, and then he was the top 10 once. So like he finished number 1 last year, and that's what you want out of a guy like Alvin Kamara when you're drafting him so high. But if you're going to draft him at number 3, I mean, I just don't see how he's going to end up being the top 5 running back or top 3 running back with all the question marks in New Orleans right now. So if Jameis Winston's the quarterback, I feel a little bit better about it. But even Jameis Winston doesn't really target a lot of the percentage of what Drew Brees and then Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill target the running back is so much lower that I just don't see it. So that's gonna be a hard person not to go after in my leagues, but in my redraft leagues. But as a guy that I love to watch play, but maybe I take a year off on owning Alvin Kamara and seeing what he does with the new quarterback and the new offense. But he's definitely a guy that he's definitely a caution for me, but I'm not saying you don't draft him, but just have expectations, be a little cautious optimism right there just because of that. And then my second running back I have on my list as a caution player is Jonathan Taylor. So Jonathan Taylor right now is ranked 8th overall in PPR formats. And to be honest with you, like, this is a guy that he had a very good end of the season. So he was a guy that, overall he was the RB6 last year as we finished. And a lot of that came at the end of the season. I mean, he had a great rookie season overall, but he didn't really make that leap until like week 13. And like I said, if it wasn't for that run at the end of the season, he wouldn't have been a top 10 running back. But if you look at exactly what happened in the first 10 weeks, he was an RB19, right? He was RB19 in the first 10 weeks. And then you got to think about, he was sharing time with Marlon Mack. He was sharing time with Nyheim Hines. Like that's something that you look at. His strength of schedule last year was easy, just like David Montgomery. Like, he was a guy that flourished over having a weak strength of schedule. So definitely a guy who benefited from that. And honestly, like, now we go into a year that they bring over Carson Wentz from the Eagles. Now, how's that offense now evolve around Carson Wentz? Like, how do we see Jonathan Taylor being used? Are they still going to bring Nyheim Hines in and Marlon Mack? Like, what does that look like? I mean, what we saw in the first 10 weeks, is that what we're going to see when he was RB19? Is that even something that we see, like, that's the norm, or that will be what Jonathan Taylor is on that offense? Or are we going to see exactly what we saw at the end of the season, where he had this huge run and ended up being the RB6 overall? Like, those are the things that I'm concerned about. But don't get me wrong, I love his talent. I think there's potential there. I own him just like Alvin Kamara. I own Jonathan Taylor in Dynasty, so I want him to do well. But my question is, would you rather have somebody like Aaron Jones or Nick Chubb? These are guys that are being ranked behind him right now. So I think if I'm a fantasy, player right now, I'm looking at my options. I had an option between Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, and Nick Chubb. They all have question marks, right? I mean, you got Jonathan Taylor, could be in a timeshare. We got Aaron Jones. Who knows if Aaron Rodgers plays? So who knows how that offense would be? But we think that Aaron Jones is going to be a focal point of the offense, regardless if it's Jordan Love or Aaron Jones. And then you got Nick Chubb, who is in a very run-heavy offense, and he's not a big PPR guy, but he still has Kareem Hunt there too, who does get the pass-catching role a lot more than Nick Chubb does. So out of those question marks, I mean, I'm going to go with pure volume. I think Aaron Jones, if I had to pick between Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, and Nick Chubb, I think I'd actually would take Aaron Jones over Jonathan Taylor and maybe Nick Chubb. I mean, that's, if it wasn't for last year, Nick Chubb getting injured, only playing 12 games, he still ended being he was still a top 12 running back last year, and that's him missing 4 games. So if he didn't miss the games with the MCL sprain, he wouldn't have. I feel like he would have finished the season above Jonathan Taylor. So, just my thoughts on Jonathan Taylor. I think that there's a reason why like Jonathan Taylor is a guy that we saw great things at the end of the season. It wasn't consistent throughout the season. And then we have guys like Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones who've done it. We've seen it, have a history of being good. So I want to take what I've seen in the history of players being and performing rather than a guy that had a stretch of a good run and then being ranked so high. So just a guy that I'm cautioning about, just my opinion, but that's my thoughts on that. And that's, the 2 running backs I really have the most caution about. Now going to my wide receiver position, now I look at the top 12 guys and I don't see anything that really makes me feel like it's over the top. I mean, you got Calvin Ridley, who is right now top 5, which I think because of Julio Jones leaving and what he did last year, I think that's appropriate. Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver 6 last year. He's ranked at 6, so I think that's appropriate. DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, I think those are little guys that are a little high, but like honestly, I think that's an appropriate rank. And I really don't have question marks, so I really get down to like 13, and that's where Amari Cooper is. So Amari Cooper is a guy that I have on my list, and I really don't understand why he continues to be ranked this high, right? Everyone still has this love for Amari Cooper, and maybe it's me not liking Amari Cooper at all. Like, he's never a guy that ever like went after. He's a guy that he's like Kenny Galladay to me. Like, I know he's a good player, but he's not a guy that I actually go after and target in my draft. So I just don't understand that. I personally think CeeDee Lamb is the more talented wide receiver, and I feel like he is actually legitimately the number 1 wide receiver on that team. I think that he just brings more to the table than Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper. I know he plays a slot, so he gets benefit, coverage because of that. But for one, I think with Amari Cooper, he just can't stay healthy. He's still recovering from offseason ankle surgery, so I know that he just has this every year. There's something that's always nagging him. And so you can't really rely on him being there for a full season. Now, I do think if, the last few years, Amari Cooper was ranked as the wide receiver 1. He was a guy that people thought, yeah, that's a surefire wide receiver 1. Now, if you're thinking about it as a wide receiver 2, then maybe that makes a little more sense to me. The problem is that, if you're a fantasy football player that goes running back heavy, right? Say for the first 2 or 3 picks, you go running back heavy, which I do. And so then now I got to see who falls to me at wide receiver. And what if Amari Cooper is the best guy available? I just don't know if I would pick Amari Cooper over anybody else. I mean, I would take CeeDee Lamb over Amari. If I had my option between CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, I'm taking CeeDee Lamb all day. That's just my opinion. But that's the thing. Like, when you have strategies, that's why you do mock drafts, because when you have strategies like that where you're like, okay, if I do wide receiver, if I go and grab the top wide receivers, then who do I have at running back? Or if I go the top running backs, who's my options at wide receiver that gives me upside? I just don't think Amari Cooper brings you wide receiver 1 upside based on the offense they're in. I mean, you still got Michael Gallup. When Amari Cooper was on the Cowboys with Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper did not really supersede him in targets, barely by any. Like, it was, he had a little bit more targets, but it wasn't like a substantial amount. So I still think that they all get targeted pretty evenly. But if you think about if you got Michael Gallup, you got the targets have to be distributed between Michael Gallup, you got Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, you got Blake Jarwin, right? You got Zeke. I mean, if Dalton Schultz is playing, if he's a tight end too, like, that's a lot of targets to go around. And I just think that, if you're dealing with the offense that's so, in a sense of like, from a fantasy standpoint, that team is so talented offensively, it just makes me concerned for Cooper. And then Cooper has a very tough strength of schedule too. So I think there's a lot of things that make me feel like Amari Cooper being ranked, at 13 and above CeeDee Lamb is a little, concerning to me. But that's just my opinion on Amari Cooper. I'm not saying I'm right, but like, that's just when I think about Amari Cooper, these are the things I think about on why I wouldn't draft him to be a guy that if I'm doing a running back heavy strategy, that I'm gonna pick him as a wide receiver 1 and hope for the best. But that's just my opinion. And then my second wide receiver, I actually got 2 in this group because they're on the same team, is Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Now, Chris Godwin is ranked 16th, and then Mike Evans is ranked 18th. I'm just nervous about both of their upsides, right? Like, Godwin had a phenomenal 2019 season where he finished as the wide receiver 2. Last year, he was the wide receiver 31 because he was injured and didn't play a full season. And that's when you saw Mike Evans. He was the wide receiver 11 last year because of that. So, we've seen Mike Evans be in for the last, 7 seasons. He's had over 1,000 yards receiving. And that's something I feel like possibly could come to an end this year. Mike Evans, he had just over 1,000 yards. He had 13 touchdowns. But you got to think about that was without Chris Godwin there. Even with Chris Godwin playing, Chris Godwin was targeted a lot more than Mike Evans was. So now you think about the Tampa Bay Bucks, right? Now they bring everyone back from the Super Bowl team, and that includes Antonio Brown, right? So there has to be enough targets to go around for Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, Antonio Brown, O.J. Howard, and then whatever Fournette or Ronald Jones gets. And you got to think about Cameron Brate. Like, there are so many targets here, and you got Scotty Miller. Like, I just don't see the upside of where these guys are going to be fantasy relevant from maybe for a flex, maybe a wide receiver 2. But like, you're looking for guys with upside, and I think they have upside as a wide receiver 2. But I just don't think you're going to get what you've gotten from Chris Godwin and Mike Evans the last few seasons happening this year. And that's coming from a Bucs fan that trying to be non-biased or unbiased or whatever to my team that I love and cheer for. But that's the reality of they got so much talent from a fantasy standpoint. I don't feel comfortable drafting them knowing there's so many players on that team that they have to feed. So those are my caution wide receivers. All right, so my last player on my list is the tight end position, and I think this is an obvious pick. I think a lot of people are concerned about this from a value standpoint, and that's Kyle Pitts from the Atlanta Falcons. Now, right now he's ranked 6, and honestly, I can't remember the last time a rookie tight end was ranked so high in fantasy drafts. We've seen a lot of rookies who were kind of unknown players that eventually had a good rookie season, but weren't ranked so high and drafted so high. The last time that we saw a top tight end in the top 5 that finished that way was Evan Ingram in 2017. But he benefited from OBJ being hurt, and then he absorbed those targets and had a phenomenal rookie season and finished as the top 5 tight end. Now, when you look at the Falcons have produced a pretty decent amount of top 10 tight ends. So they've had a top 10 tight end since 2018. But when you look at value, like where they're drafted and ranked and all that stuff, when it came to Austin Hooper was never ranked higher than a top tight end. He was never ranked higher than tight end 10 in most drafts. So that alone, I mean, he has finished in the top 10, which there's value there, but he's never been a tight end that was ranked inside the top 10. And then in last year, we did have Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst was ranked at the tight end 8, and he finished as the tight end 10. So you lost a little value there, but not too bad, where tight end last year was pretty much a crapshoot anyways. But and the thing about it too, speaking of Hayden Hurst, he is still in Atlanta. So you got to think about Kyle Pitts. I mean, he's a rookie coming from a college atmosphere, going to the NFL, transitioning to the NFL. I know he's super athletic. I'm not taking anything away from his ability, because if he finishes as the top 5 tight end, I'm not going to be surprised. But we're looking at, do you go somewhere, do you draft someone like that so high and then you miss out on players that bring you better value when you can string tight ends and go that, do that, as the season progresses. But, I still think that Kyle Pitts is going to be the third option. I know Julio Jones is gone, and I think that really hurts the Falcons offense. We don't know what that offense is going to look like. We got Mike Davis as a new running back. You got Julio Jones gone. You got Calvin Ridley stepping up as the wide receiver 1. Potentially maybe Russell Gage as the wide receiver 2. Then you got Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst. Like, there's a lot of just unknowns to the Atlanta Falcons. I know they have a top passing offense, but I just don't. I'm just curious to see what the departure of Julio Jones does to this offense. And I feel like if Julio Jones was still there, I think he would not be on my list as a caution player because of where he's ranked. So that's just my take on Kyle Pitts. I think that if you're drafting in Dynasty, I think that that's a great pick. I think that he's a guy that will potentially bring you Dynasty value. But when it comes to what he does this season, I'm just very skeptical. Now, I'll eat crow if he ends up being a top 5 tight end. But as of right now, it's all about value. And I just don't see Kyle Pitts being above. Obviously you got Kelsey, you got Kittle, you got Waller. And then I guess between like 4 and 6, I mean, if he finished within that range, then you got your value out of him. But it'd just be interesting to kind of see how Kyle Pitts performs. I'm excited to actually see him play, but I just don't think I'll draft him in redraft leagues. I would in Dynasty, but not redraft leagues. But so those are my caution players. So I got at quarterback Jalen Hurts, running back is Alvin Kamara and Jonathan Taylor. At wide receiver, I have Amari Cooper, then Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and then tight end, I have Kyle Pitts. So, let me know what you think about my caution players, right? Who are you staying away from this year? Who are guys that you are just second guessing that you want to take off your draft board just because of concerns about how they're produced and where they're being ranked at and value wise? So, leave a comment below and let's discuss that. But if you have any Facebook questions and you want to interact with me, shoot me an email at chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com. And if you want to follow us on social media, we're at the Gridiron Pod on Twitter and Facebook. We're at Gridiron Fantasy Football on Instagram. So do me a favor, please like, share, and comment on the YouTube channel and with the podcast. And on Monday, I'm going to be doing another mock draft. So I'm going to do one next week on Monday. And then I'm going to start getting into a mini series about, based on kind of what we're talking about today about who do you rather draft in what position and who sees the best value. So that's going to be a series coming soon. But that's it for today. And we'll see you on Monday. Take care.